So now we're on the top of Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis. Ein Choshin L'miuta. According to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, we're not being choshesh for miut. Meaning, it's possible that this Ubar is a nekeva. She doesn't get any Yerusha at all, and therefore she wouldn't passel the Truma as an Eni Yalud. And even on the tzad, that the Uber is a Zocher, it's very possible that Uber will turn out to be, unfortunately, a Nefel, and he will not inherit. And therefore, as long as there's a Charim alive, then Yochlu B'Truma. Rabbi Yossi is worried about the miut, and that means that maybe the Uber would turn out to be a Zocher who will be a Ben Kayoma and will be a Yoresh, and an Uber ain't a Machil. And therefore, the Avodim cannot eat Truma because the Chelko Shel Uber. Ibai Seima, the Gemara offers another answer. Li Olam, it could be Bein Rabbi Yossi, Bein Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Kasavar. They both agree that Choshen L'miuta. And if she was left as a Muberes, the Avodim cannot eat Truma because of the Chashash. Maybe the Uber will turn out to be a Zocher that'll inherit his portion. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that if he has Bonim Zchorim, then the Avodim can eat. That's because the Avdin Le Takant. The Rabbanan are going to make a takana, and they're going to establish an apotropis who's going to divvy up the Yerusha, the Nechasim that are being inherited from the father's estate. So what they're going to do is that they're going to designate the Avodim for the Bonim, and as a result, the Bonim will inherit, leave out the Uber, right? The Bonim will inherit the Avodim, and therefore they can be Machil, the Avodim B'Truma. The Uber will be given a different allotment in the estate, but not the Avodim. And this is something that reflects the Shita, the statement of Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. The Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel Yisomim Shebo lachlok b'nichsei avim bezdim amidim lehem afetropis ubar lehem chelik yafa. That when Yisomim Ketanim come into Bezdin and they want to divide up the estate of the late father, Bezdin will appoint for each Katan an apotropis who will represent the best interests of each Katan, and the apotropis will choose a chelik yafa, that which is appropriate for his, so to speak, mishaleh, that katan. Now, higdilu yecholim limcha. So, if the apotropis is operating based on the underlying principle of zach and the other shalom b'fanav, and the apotropis assumed that that particular chelik would be a zchus, zachin would be a good thing for the katan that he's representing. So we have halacha in Zechia that you can be zoch on behalf of someone without that person even knowing about it. But if he objects when he finds out about it, then he completely nullifies the Zechia. And here too, says Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, that when Yisomim are represented by the apotropis, and the apotropis is assuming that he's operating on their well behalf, on their best interest, but when they become Gdolim, they can say, no, we don't want this. We want to be Mavatil, that chiluk, that chaluka that was instituted by the apotropis. And this is what Rav Nachman says in the name of Shmuel. However, Rav Nachman Didei Amar, he himself disagrees, and he holds Higdilu Ein Yecholim Lim, that this case of an apotropis is different than classic Zoch and Liodim Shalom B'fanav. And why Dim came? Because if they, the Ketanim, when they become Gdolim, be Mavato the Chalukas apotropis, Bezdin Yof. So what do we gain by the fact that Bezdin appointed an apotropis? And Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who said that Scharim Yochelu, that means if there's a ben and they divvy up the Yerusha, reflecting the takana of Rav Nachman and the name of Shmuel, the avodim will eat truma because of the ben hanolad kfar, whereas the ubar will get some other part of the nechas. But if they're all banos, then the avodim cannot eat truma, because if it turns out that the uber is a zachar, he will be the sole heir and inherit the entire kit and caboodle. The banos are not yorshus kishiyesh ben. And here it's not shak to make a takana to divvy up the nechasim between the uber and the banos. So the uber is definitely going to be yarshening the avodim. You follow? Because this takana is only shayach to designate a certain allotted property when there are two yorshim. But here, on the side that the uber is a male, there's only one yorish, so you can't say that he won't yarshin the avodim, and therefore the avodim are excluded from truma. Clarifies this. This lema de Rav Nachman Toihi. Do we assume that this takana of Rav Nachman, that the Bezdin will appoint an apotropos on behalf of Tanim to divvy up the Yerusha, is really the subject of the machlokas between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Yossi? That Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who says that if they're bonim scharim, the avodim can eat truma. He holds like Rav Nachman that we're going to appoint an apotropos for the uber, and we're going to exclude the uber from ownership and Yerusha and the avodim. Rabbi Yossi Omar ein avodim ochlim. Why? Because he rejects Rav Nachman and he holds that we're not going to be mamed apotropos for the uber, and therefore the uber is yoresh the avodim, and therefore he's posted them for truma. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yossi, in rejecting Rabbi Nachman, we're not going to appoint an apotropos, and we're not going to divide up the Yerusha until the children become gdolim. Gemara says, lo. No, the Tanoim are not arguing about Rav Nachman. The Kuli Alma Islu Rav Nachman. Even Rabbi Yossi agrees that we can set up an apotropos for the Yisomim Ketanim to divvy up the Yerusha, and if they designate the avodim for the noladim, the bonim noladim, then they can eat true v'hacha. But here in the Brisa, where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Yossi are arguing, we're talking about a case where they didn't make a takana, they didn't set up apotropos, and v'choshen l'miuto kam mifli. Rabbi Yossi holds v'choshen l'miut, and therefore the uber might be a zachar bar kayoma, and he's a yoresh, and therefore he's not a machil, and therefore the avodim cannot eat truma. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai holds adamach choshish for miut, and rov ubrim are either nekevos or nefolim, and they're not yorshim. And therefore, if there are bonim that are alive and well, they can be machil truma to the avodim. Now the Gemara goes back to the Brisa of Rabbi Yishmael bir Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yishmael bir Rabbi Yossi omer mishum aviv habas macheles habenenu machil. And the Gemara thinks that what he means is that if the Kohen dies and he leaves a daughter and an ubar, then the avodim can eat truma. But if he leaves a son and an uber, the avodim cannot eat truma. So whereas Maishno ben de lo machil mishum chelko shel ubar is bas nami lo tachil mishum chelko shel ubar. If he left a ben and an ubar, so the avodim cannot eat truma because of the chelek, the inheritance of the ubar and the avodim, because the ubar is now a yoresh, but he's ma'akev mi'achil, he's a posel achil's truma. And the same exact logic should apply in the case of a basmi uber. Nami lo tachil mechelko shel ubar. That the uber will inherit the avodim, and they prevent the avodim from eating truma. So when it says Amar Abaye, Rabbi Yishmael did not intend to say that if he left a bas and an ubar without any bonim, the bas is macheles, the avodim truma, because then we have the question that we asked, Maishna, the Uber has a chelik in the Yerusha, and therefore the avodim cannot eat truma. But hacha b'nechasim muatem askinu. The case here is that the Av left over nechasim muatim. There's not enough for the Ubar and the Banim because there's a pressing need to support the Banos until they become Bogros. They cannot fend for themselves. And the Banim will go out and get a job, but and have an income to support themselves, but the Banos are in trouble. So in this case of Nechasim Mu'atim, the father was Meschayv in the Ksuba to support his children as his Banos, as long as they are Ktanos and Naros, until they become Bogros. So the Chachamim will Mesakein a takana that the Banos will receive the Nechasim. The Banim will not be supported from the estate because it's the Nechasim Mu'atim. And the Banim are going to have to knock on doors, and get Nedavas. If you go into Ika Ben Bahadi Bas, so the father left a Ben and a Bas. On the Doraisa level, the Nechasim are inherited by the Ben. But since we're talking about Nechasim Mu'atim, the Rabbanan made a takana that the Nechasim belong to the Bas. Because otherwise they'll starve. And here's where we say that the Bas is Macheles La'avodim, the Eina Ubar, Ma'akev es Avodim Ilecha B'Truma. And the Gemara explains, Mimonefsha. Di Haidi Mi Abra Benhu, if the Uber turns out to Ben Lo Odif Mi Haide Kai. He's not superior to the Ben that's alive. And the Ben that's alive doesn't take any part in inheriting his father's nechasim, because they're nechasim mu'atim. That's the takonas chachamim. So the ubar, even if he's a zach, would not yarshin his father because we're talking about nechasim mu'atim. So the nechasim are completely, exclusively dedicated to the bas, and the avodim now could eat truma because of the bas. But for basi, if the ubar turns out to be a bas, then once again, she's not ma'akiv the avodim from eating truma because since if there would be banim, if the rice of the chassid belong to the banim, is amai achla. Why does the bas inherit her father's nechasim? Because the takan to the rabbana. The rabbana made a takana that the chassid belong to the banos, and the chachamim were masaking that takana only on behalf of the banos that are alive in nimtzos ba'olam. They were already nold. For kamadolo nofik, the avra the ubar has not yet popped at its head. Lo takinu rabbana, the rabbana never gave a schus to the chasim to the lo nolan, to the ubar de lo nofka li avra olam. So the avodim now can eat truma. So we see that Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi holds that Abbas Macheles, when she has also a ben, and a ben eno machil, in a case where there were only bonim, because of the cheliko uber yarshins and ena uber machil. So Gemara has the following kasha on Abaye. B'mayu kimta nechasim mu'atim even sefer. But Shimba Yochai in the sefer says that if the father left only banos, the avodim cannot eat truma because of shemayimtza ubar zacha. The ein la banos b'mokom ben klum. So the avodim belong to the uber, and the uber cannot be machal b'truma. According to you, Abai, that we're talking about nechasim mu'adim, is adram nechasim mu'adim the banos nindu. The avodim made a takana that even if there's a ben, the nechasim go exclusively to the bas. Why shouldn't the avodim eat truma? So Gemara answers seifa ason the nechasim merubim. So even though the Reish is talking about nechasim mu'atim, But the Seifa, in which Rabbi Yishim Bar Yochai says that if there were bonos, the Avodim cannot eat because of the Chelik Uber, that's the case in the Chasim Merubin. So the Av is Morish, the Chasim Merubin, and in that case, there was never a takana for the bonos. We have to be concerned with the possibility that the Uber might be a Zochar and he's Yorich, and therefore the Avodim cannot eat Truma. The Gemara says, is it really true that Nechasim Muat the Banos Ninu? Ve'ha'amar Ravi Asiyam Rabbi Yochanan Yisomim Shekadmu Machu B'Nechasim Mu'atim Asher Machu Machu. That if the male children went ahead and they sold Nechasim Mu'atim, the sale is valid. We're not going to take the Nechasim out of the possession of the Lekuchos, for the sake of Mizonos Abonos. So you see that as far as Mechir is concerned, the Nechasim are considered in the Rishus of the Bonnet. So how could the Avodim therefore eat Truma because of the Bonos? So the Gemara says now, getting back to Rabbi Yishmael, the way Abaye interpreted Rabbi Yishmael, the Lamai, what does it mean, Bas? The Katani, the Brisa says the name Rabbi Yishmael, Abbas Machila. It's referring to the aim, to the Almon of the Kohen. Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi meant to say that the Almon of the Kohen eats Truma, for example, in a case where she has Bonim from her husband, the Kohen. She could also be Machil Avdi Maluk Shala B'Truma because they're her Avodim. And when he said Haben and Machil, he meant to say he's not Machil Avdi Tzom Barzel B'Truma because of the Chelik of the Ubar B'Yerusha. And the Bas is not Machilas Avodim because the Chelik of the Ubar. So when I see Hachi Hainu Rabbi Yossi, turns out that Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi are saying, Rabbi Yossi, his father, saying the exact same thing. And according to both of them, in a case of Ashes Cohen, who eats Truma, she's Machli Avdi Maluk Shala, and the Avdi Tzom Barzel cannot eat when she was left pregnant because of the Chelik Shel Ubar. The Brisa seems to indicate that they're arguing with each other. And the Gemara answers no. Kula, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi, K'tanila. There is no machlokas. The entire Brisa is Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi. He was teaching the entire Brisa. And that is in the name of his father, Rabbi Yossi. And this leads us to the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Samach Zayin Amid Beis. So the Mishnah is going to clarify different scenarios in which a Bas Kohen is married or mureses, or she has a zika to a person who passes up from Chilas Truma of Beis Aviyah, or in the flip case of a Bas Yisrael who's married or mureses, or she has a zika to a person she'ena mitchila lechol b'truma. Ha'ubar, the Mishnah says that if a Bas Kohen is married to a Yisrael or a Bas Yisrael is married to a Kohen, and the husband dies and he leaves her pregnant and she has no children from him, just the Ubar, the Yavam, or a Bas Kohen who's married to Yisrael or a Bas Yisrael married to a Kohen, and her husband dies without children and she is Kuka Liyibum, or Chalitza from the Yavam, Va'erisin, or Bas Kohen shenis Arsel Yisrael, or Bas Yisrael shenis Arsel Kohen. They were not married with Nesuin, Vacheresh, or Bas Kohen shenises Yisrael Cheresh, or Bas Yisrael shenises LeKohen Cheresh, and the Nesuin of a Cheresh is only to Rabbanan, or Ben Teisha Shanam Yom Echad. In all these cases, if she is a Bas Kohen to Yisrael, then poslim, they will passel her from eating Truma B'Beis Aviyah. Ve lo machilin, if it's a woman who's a Bas Yisrael married to a Kohen, they will not be able to be machal her Truma. Safek shu ben teisha shanam yom echad safek She'eno ben Tesha Shanim Yom Echad. He also passes She'eno Machil. Suffolk Hevish Te Saros. And he's a gadol and kedushin is kedushin, and v'safik shelo hevish te saros ukatan posel misafik ve'eno machil. Then the Mishnah concludes by telling us that nafal abayis olav v'al ishto she bas achiv. Notice he married the daughter of his brother, and the bias never fell on both of them, and he had another wife. We don't know who died first. If the Baal died first, and therefore Bas Achim Nafal Libum Liachiv Shuavia, the Ptur Min Yibum, very Ervolov after us, Ptur Min Yibum. She's a Tzaras Abbas. Or Mitchila Mesa Ishto, perhaps, but wife died first, so she doesn't fall for Yibum. The Bas did not fall for Yibum in front of her father, and therefore Kishemes Chayeves Tzarasa B'Yibum, because at the time of the Nefila for Yibum, she was not a Tzaras Erva, and this is all a suffix. We don't know who died first. He or she is Tzarasa Choletzes V'lo Misyabemes. Choletzes because perhaps the wife died first, and therefore she needs Yibum. But Velomis Yabevis, because maybe the Baal died first, and she's Asura Olav Mishum Tzaras Erva. Gemara says, Ubar, that which we learned in the Mishnah, the Ubar is Posel Ve'eno Machil. So the Gemara says that the Mishnah means to say that I Bas Kohen Shenises the Yisrael he, and the Yisrael dies and leaves an Ubar Posele. She cannot go back as a Bas Kohen to eat Truma Bebeis Avia, because we're going to dash in the Pasuk, it says, Bebas Kohen Hanasua Li Yisrael Shes Armala O His Garsha Vizera Eila V'Shava El Beis Avia Kinurea V'Lechem Avia Tochail V'Dafka V'Zman She Domel L'Nureha Yechol Loshav Bebeis Avia Prat L'Muberes She'ena Domel L'Nureha Ena Shava L'Beis Avia. The Bas Yisrael Kohen he, so she has no children except for the Ubar from her late husband, the Kohen, is Lo Machila, and that's based on a drasha of the Yelud Beis Ohem Yochel B'Lachmo, is Yelud Machil, She'ena Yelud Eno Mach. Now the Mishnah says that Yavam Posel Ve'eno Mach. The Gemara explains. Ibas Kohen Li Yisrael he. So she was married to Yisrael, and he died without leaving children. Now she falls for Yibam in front of the brothers who are all Yisrael, Pasale. So the Zika prevents her from going back to Beis Avia to eat Truma. And this is based on the Pasuk Bas Kohen Kisiel Mono Grusha V'Zera Ein Lo V'Shovel Beis Avia Kinurea Milechem Avia Tochel B'Chol Zar Lo Yochel Bo. Now we darshan that Dafka Hashava LeBeis Avia Ocheles B'Truma Prat L'Shomers Yavam. She cannot return right now to Beis Avia because she's Kuka L'Yibam and Skuka L'Yavam. Ibas Yisrael LeKohen he. So she was married to a Kohen. Her husband died without children. She's a Bas Yisrael. Then the Yavam, who's obviously a Kohen, Lo Machil, cannot be Machil her. Why? Because Kinyan Kaspa Rachmana, Vaha Kinyan Di Achiv. The Torah says that a Kohen is Machil, his wife, Truma, because she is Kinyan Kaspa. But in the case of a Zika, of a Shomer's Yavam, that's not called Kinyan Kaspa. It's called Kinyan Di Achiv. The Mishnah says, "Va'erisin poslim ve'enem achilin," and the Gemara explains the intention of the Mishnah that ibas kohen li Yisrael, if he was a bas kohen shenis arsa Israeli Pasole. The Orus passes her from eating truma because she's already considered married to him. Dakanya Bahavoya. From the time of the Kedusha, the Erison, she's already Knuya lo. So now she's Knuya to Israel. And the Torah says, Ubas Kohen Kisel Ish Zar, He B'Trumas HaKadoshim Lo Sochel. And here we have a case already that she's a Bas Kohen Sia Li'ish Zar. Sia means Havaya. And that's Kedusha. Shows already Knuya to a Zar. Therefore, she's prohibited from eating Truma. Be Bas Yisrael Kohen. Now there's an erison between a Bas Yisrael and a Kohen. Lo machil, that's not a doraisa halacha. On a doraisa level, she's already considered kinyan kaspo as a result of the erison. She can eat truma, but the Rabbanon said she cannot eat truma mishum de ula. The statement of ula in ksubis tafnun zayinam and beis. The Rabbanon made a gzeira that an Eishes Kohen Arusa should not eat truma since she's still living in Beis Avia, and Wuchshash that maybe she'll give truma to other members of her family who are zarim, and therefore she cannot eat truma until she is Acha Tinase Vitikanes Lebesa. And that leaves us here on the top of Samad Tes Samad Aleph with Veha Cheresh.